From Homemade Cooking, and I'm here with Chef Jonathan, and we've also got hiding out in the background, we've got Daniel, who's a homemade member. He's going to join us in a minute, and we've also got my friend Scott, who's helping with all the tech setup. So thank you so much for being here and for being on time. So if you just want to test out the chat section, you can actually comment, tell us where you're calling in from, and what your name is, so we can chat to you while we're doing the session today. And also you can also raise your hands while we're running the session if you want to agree with something or if you have any questions. We'll try and answer your questions as we go along during the workshop, but if we don't get to them, because we've got a lot to get through, we'll do live Q&A at the end. So hold your questions. So if anyone here can see me, say hey, shout out, and just open up the chat and tell me where you're calling in from and what your name is, and if you want to share your favorite bread. So Jonathan, what's your favorite bread?
So one of my favorite breads is actually one that we're making today. It's a sourdough with potato. So it's a sourdough potato bread.
Awesome.
So it's 1 part potato, 2 part flour. So it's something a little different and unique than you'll normally see in breads. So
awesome.
It's a fun one to make.
That sounds amazing. And well, one of my favorites, I love French baguettes. I love a good German rye bread, which we've got a recipe for in the bread making guide if you receive that. And I also love, though, a good seeded dense loaf. So here I hear Sharon, all good, calling in from Redwood City. Hey, Sharon. So do you just want to share with us what your favorite bread is? And everyone else, if you've just joined us, just let us know where you're calling in from, your name, and what your favorite bread is while we wait for everyone to arrive. So thank you so much for being on time. I'm so excited. We're going to be making the potato sourdough for you today, and also the no-knead seeded loaf. So if you've got your bread making guide, you can find the link in the emails I sent out. You can actually cook along with us today, which is cool. And the only quick 2 pro tips to make sure you have success is you are going to need a sourdough starter. We're going to talk about if you can substitute yeast if you don't have a sourdough starter, because you may have that, or you can pick it up easily at a local store. Otherwise, in the bread making guide, I included a link to a good sourdough starter you can buy online. Jonathan, do you want to say a few words about how to make your own sourdough starter while we're waiting?
Yeah, so really it's just equal parts flour and water. You'll mix it together and make a little paste, and you want to leave it open and leave it in your fridge, and it'll collect bacteria and it becomes alive. It starts to get kind of bubbly and fermenty and sour. Really, the longer you can keep it alive and feed it, a little bit of flour every often, it'll kind of eat that up, add a little more water, and it'll get that funky, sour flavor that you're looking for when you're baking breads.
Awesome. So this is, of course, the friendly bacteria, the good bacteria, and they're responsible for making the little air bubbles in the bread and helping it rise, and also giving that classic San Francisco sourdough flavor. So I see Betty here from Georgetown, Texas. Love sourdough, especially if it's got garlic. So maybe we can share some tips today how to substitute garlic into your bread. And Cindy, hey Cindy, from San Leandro, and she loves all bread, but sourdough is her favorite. Great. So anyone else, if you've just joined us, feel free to share in the chat where you're calling in from, what your name is, and what your favorite bread is. And while we're waiting for everyone to get here, I'm going to share with you 3 quick bread facts that I researched preparing for this workshop that I think are so interesting. Number 1 is, did you know that the first historic evidence of bread production actually dates back 30,000 years to evidence that humans use the roots of vegetables, the starchy roots of vegetables, to prepare food for themselves? So to put it in perspective, cars were invented about 130 years ago. And so humans have been preparing bread or bread-like substances for 30,000 years. And then, of course, bread really took off around 10,000 BC when agriculture really spread and we had more access to grains. Now, the second interesting bread fact I wanted to share with you all is that there was a man, his name I always forget, Otto Friedrich Roeder, who invented sliced bread in 1912. And at the time, all the commercial bread manufacturers refused to put it on the shelves because they said consumers would not tolerate the staleness and the lack of shelf life. So it wasn't until 1928 that he finally got his friend to stock it. And the way they addressed the staleness issue was he wrapped it in wax paper, and it took off like wildfire. So by 1933, 80% of the bread sold in America was actually sliced, and you got that saying, nothing better than sliced bread. But now get this, in 1943, the Secretary of Agriculture and the head of the War Administration for America decided to ban the sale of sliced bread because there was bizarre reasons. They were trying to conserve wax paper and wheat, even though they had an abundance of wheat. So this went down like a ton of bricks. The consumers rebelled. They wanted their sliced bread back. So within 3 months, the ban got lifted. So some interesting little bread facts for you. And if you've just joined us, just comment in the webinar chat, bring it up. Everyone can see if you comment in there, share your name, where you're calling in from, and what your favorite bread is. So third little interesting bread fact, that in 1997, Kansas produced enough wheat to create 36 billion loaves of bread, which is enough to give every person on the planet 6 loaves. So wheat is actually the single biggest crop that feeds the most people on earth. So amazing facts about bread. So we're going to be making bread today. I'm joined here by Chef Jonathan. And so you can follow along at home, we're going to start with preparing the potato for the potato sourdough bread. So do you want to start with the potato?
Yes.
And if you just want to start, we've got, so you need 1 Yukon Gold potato or any potato if you want to follow along at home. And you can literally just peel that potato, and we're going to pop it in this pot and get it boiling. And you can do this at home if you're following along. And then we'll get going on the other bread while the potato boils, and then come back to this. So over to you, Jonathan.
So actually we're going to peel the potato after we boil it.
Oh.
So we're going to put it in a pot, start off with cold water, bring it up to a simmer, let it simmer for about 20 minutes or so, just till it's soft. You can slide a knife right in and out. You know it's ready. We always salt our water so it absorbs some of that flavor in. And then after that, then we'll peel it and get started on our bread.
Perfect. So Jonathan's going to head over to the stove and get the potato boiling. And I'm going to sit back for a minute and give you guys at home who are following along the opportunity to get your potato boiling. So if you haven't already, grab a pot, get some water, grab a potato, and you can get your potato boiling to make your potato sour bread at home. Now, sourdough bread. Now, if you haven't already, check my emails. I sent you the recipe guide for the bread, and that includes all the recipes we're making today, the nutritional benefits, the cooking tips, where you can buy a sourdough starter. So, and you can follow along today if you've got that, or just kick back, relax, grab a glass of wine, and enjoy the show today. And I will send everybody who's here the recording of the session so you can make it again anytime you like. So if you're new joining in, I can see more people jumping online. Just comment in the chat where you're calling in from, what your name is, and what your favorite bread is. So Jonathan's just getting the potato going over there. So hopefully everyone's had enough time to get their potato going. And we'll hear more from Jonathan later. He's an amazing chef, co-founder of Hillside Supper Club in San Francisco, one of my absolute favorite restaurants in the Bay Area. And we'll hear more from him later and his pro tips about baking bread. But for now, let me welcome Daniel to show us how to make the no-knead seeded loaf.
Hi, everybody.
So this is Daniel. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Daniel. What do you do?
So I'm actually a scientist. I'm a biologist. I worked at the university. I did my training in San Francisco, UCSF, and I'm now a neuroscientist in Silicon Valley.
Fantastic. So can someone give me a hands up if you can hear Daniel loud and clear? Yes. All right, great. I'm getting hands up. Thank you. And welcome, Karen. I'm so glad you could make it. That's Karen from Redwood City. San Francisco sourdough, very popular. And there's Lois. Oh, I'm so glad you could make it, Lois. And she's there with her sister, Sue, I believe. Nice to meet you, Sue. All right, so Daniel's going to lead us through how to make the no-knead sourdough. So before you run through how to make it, tell us how you heard about homemade cooking originally.
Originally, there was actually a health fair at my work, I think, with a gym that's there, and some other people came and offered their health services, including homemade cooking. And I signed up there, and I forgot about it for a couple of months. And then out of the blue, there was an email from you, and it said, do you want to learn how to cook? And around that time, I really wanted to learn how to cook, and I signed up, and now I'm a cook.
So tell me, where were you at before you joined the course, and where are you now? What's changed about your cooking?
Before I signed up, I had like 3 basic recipes. So, spaghetti with sauce and maybe 2 others. And I didn't really know how to prepare any of the other things that you were teaching us. I tried to be more healthy in getting vegetables in my diet, and then I subscribed to this vegetable box that came every other week. But then I never knew what to do with all these vegetables that I sometimes never heard of also. And so I was really at the point where I wanted to have something healthy for my family, not have to eat out all the time, and be able to do something new and yummy for us at home. And that's where the course was probably most beneficial, that you really learn with relatively few simple tricks to make some amazing meals.
So Daniel was telling me, before we started filming, who's the primary cook in your household now?
Me.
And who was the primary cook before you did the course?
My wife, like 60-40, my wife and I. But now it's like, then I totally appreciate your cooking. And if I don't ever have to cook in my life, it's also fun with me. So please go on.
That's what your wife says.
Yes, that's my wife.
Great. Says. Cool. Well, let's get started with the bread. So I hope if you've just joined us, comment in the chat. Tell everyone your name, where you're calling in from, and your favorite bread. And this is Daniel. He's one of actually our life-changing cooking members. So he's going to show you the no-knead seeded sourdough. And if you want to find the recipe, go to your bread making guide and you'll find the recipe, nutritional tips, and other cooking tips in there. So just tell us what's on the table and let's make the bread.
Good. So what we have here is going to be a no-knead grain bread. It's like one of my favorites, even though the fun of kneading is not part of the experience. It's easy to make, and it's super yummy, and it lasts quite a long time in your bread container as well. It doesn't go stale within a day or so. And I think it's also one of the most dense in terms of the awesome nutrients that I need.
Mm-hmm.
So we have buttermilk, we have agave syrup. You could also use barley malt, some yeast. Then we have cracked rye, cracked wheat. You get those either at Bob's Red Mill online, or I like to go to Whole Foods where they have that in bulk. Spelt is a little bit of a maybe exotic flour. I guess most people know wheat. Spelt is similar to wheat, but has slightly different features. Flax, seed, sunflower seeds, and then also apologies. I made a mistake when I sent the recipe to Anna. We also have sesame seeds. So today, if you don't have sesame seeds, no worries. But we have to add a little bit more of a flax and maybe the sunflower in order to make up for the lack of seeds that I forgot in the recipe. And we'll also actually, what I just realized, we have to add a tiny little bit of water.
Okay.
But we're going to mix everything in that bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And then the yeast, as Anna and Jonathan explained earlier, yeast needs some time to get started and create all these CO2 bubbles that are going to make the bread fluffy and soft. And so we're going to make the dough and then incubate it for about an hour, maybe 1.5 at room temperature.
So we're going to make the batter with you if you're following along at home. We're going to show you the finished batter, and then we're going to set it aside covered for about an hour to an hour and a half. And at the end, we're going to show you one we prepared earlier. So, Jonathan, if you could grab, how much water did you need?
50 grams.
Just 50 grams of water, half a cup.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, Lois, you mentioned that we have everything in grams. Oh, welcome, Jason. I'm glad you could make it. So, Lois emailed me. She mentioned we have everything in grams, and I told her we do the cup conversions today, but we might not actually get a chance to do that. So, I hope everyone has a kitchen scale like this at home. You can buy them online if you don't. They literally cost about $30, $40. And I do recommend you buy one on Amazon, because if you're going to start baking anything, you're going to have to be precise. And I think everyone who's followed my programs knows I don't bake because I hate measuring anything. So Lois, you'll probably do really well with baking. And so you should get yourself a scale is the answer about that question. And we've got Jason, Salem, Oregon, welcome. And Jason also loves anything sourdough. I'm so glad we're making a sourdough today. That's great. So, all right, take it away.
Yeah.
So let's run through, has everyone got their ingredients ready at home? Go to the recipe guide and you'll see all the ingredients listed. I hope you've got them ready. If not, you'll get the recording of this and you can make it later or just follow the recipe. So take it away.
Yes. I just also wanted to mention what you said about accuracy in cooking. I think if you're making a steak or a salad, it really doesn't matter if you have 10 grams oil more or less. But I think for bread making, especially in the beginning, it's quite crucial that you follow a well-developed recipe, because 10 or 20 grams of water or other ingredients can really make or break the dough in the end. So unless you have a lot of experience, it's probably good to have a gram-based scale. So we're going to get started with the buttermilk. We're going to use 500 grams here. And I'm going to pour that in here and look at the scale at the same time. If you have a container like this, you can basically, this is almost 2 times 500. You could use one and then make another bread later. Okay, 500. Then we have the syrup, 50 grams. I'm also just going to throw that in there right away.
So you probably can't see this at home, but we have a scale set up underneath the bowl, and Daniel is carefully calculating the exact grams of each ingredient he's adding. It's not like me ad-libbing with the recipes. He's actually calculating. And also I wanted to say welcome to Liz, Ginger, and Sana, Sana from Menlo Park, who just chimed in. So welcome.
Right. So yeast, just a quick thing about yeast. I use the active dry yeast that's also good for like an automated bread maker. The best thing that I like is yeast that's fresh. That is, you can get that in San Francisco at the Rainbow Market. That's the only place I ever found in the Bay Area that has fresh yeast. It's basically a thick paste where they concentrated the yeast, and if you put that into your bread, it's like a turbo type of yeast. One time I made a mistake. I visited friends somewhere. I wanted to make a bread. Yeah, let's make some bread. I'm an expert. And then I got the yeast that needs like 30 minutes prep time to get started, and the bread never really came out well. So make sure you have either the active dry yeast, or you make sure you know what type of yeast you have, so the recipe doesn't go downhill. Because if the yeast doesn't work, the bread is not going to come out. So we're going to use 10 grams of the active dry. That's also a little bit of a deviation of the recipe that I sent.
So note, I think the recipe said 8 grams, and it's actually 10 grams. So sorry about that, everyone.
And if you have a little bit more, it probably doesn't matter. You're just going to have more fluffiness in the bread, and you have to make sure for other breads it doesn't it doesn't overgrow in there. So now we're going to have the cracked dry. That's going to be 125 grams. I'm going to press 0 here real quick. So that's quite a lot, and that's why the bread is so dense in awesome grains. So 125 for the cracked dry. Then we have the same amount, 125 cracked wheat. I'm just gonna put that in here. All right. Then we have 250 grams. Can you double check real quick the recipe? Here? Don't mind. I don't want to mess it up. But I think it's 250 grams.
How's the potato boiling going? Is it finished?
It's not done yet.
Okay, leave the potatoes boiling. Just double checking the amount here.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, I was right. 250 grams of the spelt flour.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's up to 500. Great. Then we have, so if you have sesame seeds at home, then we're going to do 50 grams of flaxseed, 75 grams of sunflower, and 50 grams of the sesame. If you don't have sesame, then we need to have flaxseed and sunflower to compensate for the loss of the 50 grams of sesame. So you want to come up to the total amount of 50, 75, and 50. And you can virtually
So
use
it's
it
basically 175 grams of seed, and you can use any combination of flax, sunflower, and sesame. We omitted the sesame seeds from the recipe just to confuse you. So if you don't have it, then you can create the 175 grams of seeds using just the sunflower and the flax. If you have sesame, then it's 50 sesame, 50 flax, and 75 sunflower.
Exactly.
Hope you all followed that.
And that was my mistake. I apologize.
I didn't want to say it, but it was. No, it was a combination.
75 grams of sunflower. And okay, so the 50 sesame, we just explained the substitution. Good.
And
so
did
now,
you add the salt?
Now, very important. And then two last things. A little bit of 50 grams of water, and then the salt, I think, disappeared to the back. So we have 8 grams of salt. And if your scale is like mine, you should already have a little bit of something on the scale, because the first couple of grams are not very accurate. So it's good to have some flour measured already, and then add 8 grams of the salt there, so that you have an accurate amount. If you have not enough salt, it's not good. If you have too little salt, the bread will also not taste very good. So I think this is something where you should be kind of accurate. 8 grams, and then 50 grams of water. Okay, good. So here's the easiest part. We're literally just gonna mix this, and then let it rest for at least an hour at room temperature, and that's it. I'm then gonna show you how to put it into the baking pan, and that's all you need to do. So I'm just going to mix it up a little bit.
How long would you recommend everyone mixes for?
The mixing here is really just mixing the ingredients so everything is combined well. What Jonathan is going to show with the sourdough there, the mixing and kneading is much more important to get the structure of the bread and get all these cross-linking of the gluten and all the processes that happen in a sourdough bread with wheat and rye. For this one with spelt, we don't really worry about this. So we're literally just going to mix it very well so that the yeast and the salt and all the ingredients are well combined. And you will see that it's actually quite liquid. It's almost like a oatmeal porridge or something like that.
Okay.
But over time, like in an hour or so, when you come back, you will also notice that the grains will have taken up a lot of the liquid, and that it's much thicker. And then when you have that in an hour, We're basically just gonna put it in the baking pan and well ahead of time preheat the oven.
To what temperature?
To 210 Celsius.
Okay, so 450 was it, or 430?
I think that is 430, and also there's a cautionary note. You should really make sure your oven reaches the temperature that it says it will reach.
Okay.
Because temperature plus minus 20 degrees will make a difference.
Okay.
So I mixed this for about maybe 3 minutes, and I think that's more than enough. Can you see?
Yep, that's great.
So
yeah, he just mixed it, no special technique, and then you set it aside, covered with a cloth. You can just use a clean dishcloth or some plastic wrap. We've just got this one here, and you just cover it. Do you want to show the technique? And then set it aside for 60 to 90 minutes.
I'm literally just going to cover it
like literally like that.
Put it at a nice warm place. Usually I put it on my fridge because that's where the warm air comes up.
Perfect.
And that's it.
Great. And then this is we've got the pan measurements we recommended for you. We've just greased this up with some olive oil. We've dusted it with flour, and you can actually add some oats on the inside of that if you want the outside of your bread to be covered with oats, and then even just sprinkle some on top of the bread as well. So anything else? Yeah.
So no, that's actually it. I also, you can substitute the flour with just the oatmeal, but you have to make sure to cover the entire floor because that dough is quite sticky, and once it's baked, it will stick to the floor, and it could be hard to get out. So make sure there's either flour dusted or cover it extensively with the oatmeal, and that's going to be part of the crust later.
Perfect. And cooking tips, cooking time, and when to remove it from the pan?
Cooking tips. So the time is 15 minutes at 210 Celsius.
So that's 430 degrees Fahrenheit, I believe?
Yes. Double check this.
Yeah, from the recipe, I remember.
And then turn it down to 200 Celsius. The beginning temperature is a little bit higher. Just dial it down to 200 and leave it for another 1 hour, 15 minutes. So a total of 1 hour 30. If you peek in once in a while, hopefully there's glass. Don't open it too many times if there's no glass. But you see that it's kind of getting darkish. You can put some parchment paper on so that it's not getting too dark.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Daniel. We'll demo the finished product at the end, one we prepared earlier. But if you want to set your seeded loaf aside, covered with a dishcloth to rise, we'll just clear the table and we'll start to do the sourdough that it looks like everyone's very excited for. So I'll just hand this over. All right, Jonathan, you want to take over the table? Can I give?
Oh, yeah.
Great. So here comes Chef Jonathan. Let's remove this stuff from the table here. So if everybody wants to go to the seeded sourdough part of the recipe guide and get your ingredients for that ready, and then we'll start with this one. So how's the potato? Is it, you got it?
Great. The potato's not quite ready yet.
Okay, well, we'll start with, is there other stuff we can do, or we'll chat?
We can chat.
All right. So actually, this is a great segue because I really wanted to talk about the health properties and health debates about bread. And you know, it's funny when I sent out the information about this event because I thought probably half the people got it and thought, well, why is homemade cooking, which is healthy cooking, promoting bread? And I'm trying to eat less bread, not more bread. So I really wanted to take some time out to talk about the myths and facts and fiction when it comes to bread and carbohydrates and gluten and grains, because there's so much misinformation about this. So I wanted to start out by zooming out and saying back in about the 80s, the Food and Drug Administration came out saying that fats were the problem and fats were the cause of obesity, heart disease, and stroke that was rising in America at historically never before seen rates. And they came up with this public health proposal or statement because what they discovered is in the underdeveloped world, people were eating a low-fat, high carbohydrate diet, and they had no obesity, they had no stroke, they had no heart disease, they had no diabetes. So the Food and Drug Administration said, obviously, it's fat that's causing this. So they came up with this don't eat fat statement. And guess what then happened? The food industry in America started creating all of these foods that had the carbs removed and that had added artificial sugars and a lot of fat. And people started eating this food, but in the meantime, they also started creating a lot of the processed refined foods that everyone's addicted to that we now know are really unhealthy for us. So the fact of the matter is that population studies, longitudinal studies that go for decades, and the biggest population studies ever done across human populations, where they compare, for example, the population of America with the population of India or Vietnam or Cambodia, these studies prove that grains and carbohydrates are not correlated with being overweight. In fact, all the studies show that a diet high in whole grains reduces your risks for heart disease, reduces your risk for diabetes, reduces your risk for high blood cholesterol, reduces your risk for being overweight, and many other things. And so it pains me to see all these diets that gain popularity, ketosis, Atkins, South Beach, gluten-free, paleo, which all tell people not to eat grains, when the biggest studies ever done show that that whole grains are good for you. So then what's causing the epidemic in America? Well, that's also become clear from the studies, and it's the refined processed carbohydrates. It's the refined processed sugars, and it's the trans fats and the hydrogenated fats that you get in the ready-made cookies and the ready-made cakes and the processed breads. That's the stuff that, again, it's medically, biologically proven and known. This is not theory, it's fact. When you eat that stuff, it literally causes your body to shoot hormone up in your blood. And when that hormone goes up in your blood and it's chronically elevated, your body stops burning fat and it starts putting fat down, and it puts you at risk for metabolic syndrome. It puts you at risk for diabetes. It makes you gain weight. So there's no mystery about this. We know whole grains are good for you, and we know refined processed carbohydrates, hydrogenated fats, and refined sugars are not good for you. Doesn't mean you should never eat them, no, but save them for a now and then treat. As for the whole grains and the breads, try to make your own, or try to buy the whole grain, whole wheat varieties, and try and limit the processed sliced bread and the white bread and the cakes and all of that stuff. It's just simple common sense. You don't need to be in ketosis. It's so ironic. Ketosis, which is the current trending diet, it's literally, in the world of doctoring, it means starving. Why do we as humans suddenly think that putting our bodies in a state of starvation is normal or better for you? It's clearly not good for you. So carbohydrates are a macronutrient. That means they're really good for your body. Your body loves running off carbohydrates. That's why you feel good when you eat carbs, and that's why you have energy when you eat carbs. And your body registers satiety when you eat carbs. So if you have your egg white omelette with vegetables for breakfast, you might be hungry again in a few hours. But if you add some whole grains to that, a slice of bread or some quinoa, you won't feel as hungry. So that's why I'm a fan of whole grains, and I'm a fan of teaching people how to eat real food and not go on fad diets that don't work and don't last. So that's the little, let's use up some time. We have Jason here with a question about the ingredients for the sourdough. It says it calls for 50 grams of plain flour or bread flour and 330 grams of flour. What's the difference? Is there two different flours we're using for the sourdough?
Well, you can kind of, this bread is, you can kind of switch it up a little bit. I actually just have like an all-purpose flour today that we'll be using. So, but if you have like a bread flour or a wheat flour you want to sub it out for, like the bread will still work. It'll still come out. It's not a huge deal.
So basically, Jason, I think we just use those words interchangeably in this case, and you can use any flour. You can use plain flour or bread maker's flour, and they'll both be fine. So I hope everyone enjoyed my health benefits nutrition rant, and I hope it resonates as common sense. One of the things I always tell my members is when it comes to your eating and your health, don't listen to anything anyone tells you. Check in with yourself if it feels like common sense. So if what I just told you sounds like common sense, then try it out yourself and see what happens. So really glad to have had that opportunity to share that with you. And do you think our potatoes are ready now? So everyone at home, check your potatoes. We're going to peel it. We're going to mash it. We're going to make the potato sourdough. I'm very excited. Any questions about the nutritional stuff? Because there's a lot of bashing of carbs and bread and gluten. A word on gluten, which I didn't cover. So it is a fact that some people are intolerant to gluten and they have celiac disease. Now, someone with celiacs actually can't have gluten. It makes them sick. It's a disease like having diabetes. But we're starting to learn that lifestyle factors and your diet contributes massively to the development of intolerances and gluten sensitivities. And I've experienced with countless of my members that when they actually clean up their diet and start eating more real whole foods, whole grains, less of the refined processed stuff, a lot of food allergies and intolerances can go down and even go away. So if you have an intolerance, then eat more of the real food, do more of the home cooking, and then just check in with it every now and then and see if you still get the flare-ups, because you might see it changes dramatically over time. And I actually, while researching for the bread, was finding that the way that we've created processed bread in America with the addition of the artificial yeast has actually decreased dramatically the digestibility and the nutrition benefits of bread. So when you make bread at home yourself with a sourdough starter like this, you actually, there's what they call an anti-nutrient called phytic acid in grains. And when you use a sourdough starter like this, it neutralizes that. So you get more nutritional benefits out of the bread, plus it's much more digestible. So someone who feels like they've got issues with gluten, choosing more of the proper real bakery sourdough breads or making your own, you're going to get much less of the sensitivities. And also rye flours tend to be better for people with intolerances. So that is a real thing. It's a lot to do with lifestyle for many people, and you can generally reverse it. Over to you, Chef Jonathan. Yes, did you want to say something else?
The potato's not ready yet.
Okay.
We do have some other potato that's already cooked up if we want to get rolling.
Okay.
I'm not sure how, the audience, if their potatoes are cooked up yet.
Yes, so can someone tell me at home, whoever's trying to follow along, is your potato cooked and ready, or do you want to wait? Or just everybody, tell me, do you want to wait a few more minutes for the potato, or do you want us to continue along with here's one potato we cooked earlier potato? Just comment in the chat. Well, while I'm waiting for people to comment, I've got a question from Jason about the flour. He said, so 380 grams of flour then. The answer to that is correct. However, the reason the recipe says 50 grams of flour and then 330 grams of flour is because you're going to put them to different uses. Recipes often do that. So this prevents you accidentally using all the flour at the wrong time, which is what I always do when I follow recipes. So we're going to use the 50 grams of flour, goes for the sourdough starter, correct?
Yep.
And then the rest is for the bread. People are saying continue, so I think we should grab the ready-made potato and we'll carry on. Okay. So if you want to grab that. Okay. And I'll have a little quick water break. Any other questions while we're in this hiatus? Okay, right. So Chef Jonathan, before you start talking about the bread, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you become a chef? What are you doing these days?
So I grew up on Loaf Island, Washington. It's north of Seattle in the Puget Sound. And I've lived in the Bay Area for a little over 7 years now. And I started a restaurant with a good buddy of mine that I knew him from culinary school, actually. And the restaurant's 4.5 years, going on 5. Hillside Supper Club, we're a little neighborhood restaurant in Borough Heights. We make everything from scratch, handmade. Anna's there regularly, all the time. So that's how we know each other. We make our own focaccia in-house, some of our own breads here and there.
They make an amazing in-house Pop-Tart. So if you remember the stuff from your childhood or the ones you can buy, the little Pop-Tarts, they make them from scratch with amazing dough and fruit, seasonal fruit fillings. Really beautiful food. So I've had a request, Jonathan, you speak up so people can hear you better.
Okay.
So project. All right, well, teach us how to make this amazing sourdough that everyone's so excited to learn.
Okay, so everyone's got their potato, their flour. This is just an all-purpose wheat flour that we're using today. This is already weighed out.
So 330 grams of the plain flour.
Okay.
Let's grab. There you go.
There we go. Good. So what I like to do is make like almost a little well in here. So then we can put our wetter ingredients in the middle of it and then start combining them together.
So I'll just demonstrate the well. Kind of, he's made almost like a donut with the flour. That's 330 grams of plain flour measured out in there. Hopefully everyone has their kitchen scale. But so we've just got a big bowl and he's kind of made a donut so you can see the bottom of the bowl there. And we're going to put the wet ingredients in the middle there.
Okay, next we're going to add our potato that we've peeled. And we can kind of mash it up a little bit with a fork once we get it in there. But right now I'm just going to weigh it out. And we are going to do
150 grams.
150 grams. So this bread is 1 part potato, 2 parts flour. There we go, 150 grams there. Now I'm going to get a little bit of water, warm water, 100 grams of warm water, and add it in with our starter. Here's our starter. It's nice and beautiful, a little bubbly, sour smell. And so
what's in there? It's the extra 50 grams of flour, right?
We have a little bit more.
No? Okay.
We have more flour we're going to add and the water.
So this is the sourdough starter, which if you're experienced or you want to become experienced, you can make it yourself at home. In the bread making guide on page 15, I gave the instructions. Or if you're like me and you want to cheat, you can order it online, and I gave you a suggested brand in the bread making guide. So this is 150 grams of starter. This is the gold that's going to give you that sourdough taste and increase the digestibility and nutritional benefits of your bread by making the nutrients in the grains more accessible for the body to digest. And so we've got 150 grams. We're going to add it in a minute. So here comes the water. So how much water are we adding there?
We're going to add 100 grams. So we're just going to add it straight to this and mix it in with the starter. The starter I already have weighed out. That's 150 grams. And now I'm going to add 100 grams of water.
It's warm water too. So we've got 150 grams of the starter weighed out, and we're just adding 100 grams of warm water to that.
So we're just going to mix that up a little bit, and then we're also going to add our 50 grams of flour to that. We have set aside.
So Jason, this is where we add the 50 grams of flour that we separated in the recipe so that you didn't accidentally add it already, because that's what I would do. So this is where we add that extra 50 grams of flour. We're just mixing it in now with the starter. So I had a question from the audience, from Ginger, that how long does this bread last?
You know, if after you bake it off, if you wrap it up, it'll last like at least a week.
Oh wow,
sure.
That's great.
Yeah. So just you want to wrap.
Not
it
in my household.
Yeah,
it'll last
exactly.
1 to 2 days because we'll eat it.
Exactly. Okay, so you can see how this is all bubbly and the sourdough is very active, which is this is what makes the bread rise.
So yeah, I think it's too bright for you guys to see. We've got some lighting going on in here so you can see clearly, but what I can see is just a mixture that looks like kind of oatmeal or milk, but there's little bubbles coming up and bubbling on top. So Lois, I hope your starter is doing that. You weren't too sure, but everybody who's doing that at home, just look for the little bubbles coming up on top. That means it's going to rise and work out.
Okay. So actually we're going to add this little bit of honey to that as well. This will make your starter activate even a little bit more, and it'll bring this a little sweetness to your dough. So that is just 2 grams of honey, not a lot. And we're going to mix that in as well.
About a teaspoon of honey.
And we'll just let that sit for a second while we kind of mash these potatoes in the well.
So we're just using a fork now to mash the potatoes in the middle of our little donut. So while you're mashing, Chef Jonathan, would you like to share what's the best thing about being a chef?
One of the best things is, you know, all the respect you get from other people and your guests, and appreciation after you cook them food, and you know, the smiles and laughters when the restaurant is getting full, and you know, it's a really special thing, you know.
Great.
Feeding people.
That's great. I love that too. I was saying earlier, you know, one of my favorite ways to gather friends is I'll invite 60 to 80 people over for dinner, and I make them bring ingredients, and I have a theme, and we all cook together. So I also love, I think there's something so special about bringing people together over food, whether it's 2 people or 200 people. It's such a beautiful way to commune together that I think goes back eons. So definitely that's a beautiful thing. Okay.
Absolutely. So, okay, we got our potatoes kind of mashed up in there with the flour. We're going to add the sourdough mix to that now.
It kind of, the potato that's mashed in there, it kind of looks a bit like gnocchi. That's the consistency it looks like to me, in case you're wondering at home if you've mashed enough. And he's just poured the starter right in the middle of the donut. So I can see, let's see if we can tilt it and show. It's just white out. But from what I can see, it looks like it's all the wet stuff in the middle. The sourdough starter is lying on top of the mashed potato, and then there's the flour all around the edges, and now he's starting to mix it in gently with, is there a special mixing technique here going on?
No, just kind of like smashing and binding everything together, and then slowly kind of incorporating some of the flour on the sides so it doesn't all get incorporated at once. And then we can also add our salt too. So the beautiful thing about this bread is it's very simple and easy to make, and it's almost hard to mess it up. It's always, you know, you have like extra potatoes that you cooked off, or you're, you know, for dinner, and you want to utilize them, then you know, you turn it into bread. Mm-hmm. So it's a very easy thing, and it comes out beautiful.
Great. It's looking amazing. So how much salt did you just add then? 12 grams.
12 grams of salt. Okay. So now we're going to keep adding a little more of this flour, then eventually we'll get rid of the fork, and we'll use our hands and just kind of start kneading it a little bit.
Awesome.
A little more flour.
So some of my folks who are watching tonight are just getting started with cooking.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for them? What's the number one advice to keep going with cooking?
You know, just keep trying different recipes that excite you, and don't be so worried about everything being absolutely precise all the time. You know, just don't be afraid to like sub an ingredient or try it out, or make one recipe over and over again and be like, oh, you know, this didn't come out right, but now I'm going to try it this way, and learn from, you know, those mistakes. If you make one mistake, don't just give up. You know, keep trying, and you know.
See, Lois, it's fine to follow recipes over and over again. Even the professionals do that.
Yeah, that's how we create recipes. You know, we'll try one thing and then write everything down and weigh it out, and then we're like, okay, this didn't quite go right, or I need a little bit more of this, and then keep practicing, make it till it comes out right. So I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on my hands so my hands don't stick to the dough, and there's still a good amount of flour that we got to incorporate in. So just going to kind of slowly start folding that flour in.
So I'm going to tell you what I can see here. It's about 50%. Can you lift up the dough to show them how much is done? So it looks like sort of, there you go. That's how much is already in, and there's about double that much. So one part of the flour is in the dough now, and about one part is not in the dough yet, maybe a bit less. But so it's starting to form a dough, but he's still got a lot to work in there. That's all around the edges. So he's just bit by bit working the dough in off the edges. It looks so amazing. I wish you could see better the actual dough. Tech support. Is it possible to, this is Scott, everyone. No, so what I'm seeing in the bowl is that it looks like a whiteout in, oh yeah. We're going to move the camera closer so you can maybe see better what's in the actual bowl for a bit. It just looks like whiteout of the actual, what's in the bowl. So could we turn the lighting away a bit? This is Scott, everyone. So let's see if we can help you to see a little bit better what's going on in that bowl. Could we turn the lighting? Oh, that's better. There you go.
Yeah, so we're just slowly incorporating this flour a little bit at a time until it will all be in that dough.
That's much better. No, this is much better. What if we turn that light a slightly bit out, a tiny bit, so it's not glaring in there as much? I'll tell you if that improves it. Yeah, a bit more? No, okay, that's two. That's fine, yeah. All right, everyone, give me a comment, someone, if you can see that better now and you can see what's going on. Everyone said much better. Okay, great. So I hope you've got your hands up to your wrists in flour at home and you're following along with this. So you can see this technique. He's basically grabbing small amounts of flour and then pressing down with the heel of his hand and just turning it over and turning it over. Is this part of the chemical reaction that's going to help it rise?
Yeah, I mean, this is, starting to work the glutens in there. So it's kind of, the gluten is like almost like an elastic band. So if you work it, then it's going to be able to stretch out and then kind of comes back together.
We just lost focus. Oh, it's back. Just lost focus there for a second, but it's back.
We'll let it rest and let it rise, and the natural fermentation from the starter will start to happen.
Great. Any questions? Oh, Lois says the dough is totally sticking to my hands. Should I keep adding flour?
Yeah, just tell her,
She can hear you. You can tell her.
Just add a little flour to your hands and kind of rub them together like this, and then kind of that little bit of sticky dough will kind of crumble off, and then you can kind of just keep kneading your dough and incorporating that flour. Once you incorporated all the flour, then you can knead it for a little bit, and then you'll want to stop, and we'll cover it up and let it rest and let it rise. And
how long are we going to let it cover and rise for?
It's best to do it for about 2 hours.
Okay.
So we have another dough that's already prepared and rising as we speak. So
Lois, did you try his trick of adding flour to your hands and rubbing the dough off, and did that work? By the way, how are you typing with all the flour on your hands? Anybody else doing this and want to share a comment or a progress or a question right now?
So the first time I saw this bread being made was a buddy of mine's mom when I was just a kid, and she wouldn't even use a recipe or nothing when she made the bread. She just took a potato, boiled it, kind of mashed it up, put it in a well of flour, and threw some starter in there, salt.
Wow.
And just kind of, incorporate the flour till it seemed about right. And then I just saw it sitting on, she had a little wood cook stove that would just kind of rest on and rise and bake it off. And
Wow.
just you make something so many times, just kind of learn how to eyeball it. That's one of the beauties of this bread is like you don't need to be worried about every ingredient being absolutely perfectly measured out, but it's still going to come out, you know. As long as you have like a good starter, it's going to give it that good sourdough flavor. You have a nice hot oven, and you incorporate enough flour that it can take.
We're just showing you talking now.
Okay.
Great.
So yeah,
So what other little troubleshooting tips have you got for us? What are the things that can go wrong here and how to prevent them? Yeah. You want to say?
You know, baking it off. We're gonna bake it off, and you know, if you have a little Dutch oven, we're gonna use 2 cast iron pans. I would say every oven is different, so there's no like, you know, if you say 450 degrees on one oven, it's gonna be different than the other oven. So that to me is like the biggest part is when you're baking it, because you know, if you undercook it or overcook it, you know, it could affect the bread in a big way. So you kind of have to keep an eye on it as you're baking it and check it a couple times.
Great. So if people at home have a fast oven, which means it's hotter than, if you normally follow a recipe and your oven takes less time to cook than what the recipe said, how long would you suggest they cook this for?
If you have a hot oven, maybe like 20 minutes, and then 5 minutes without the lid.
Okay.
But, you know, once you take the lid off too, you're pretty much finishing it, getting that brown color on the bread, and then it's done. So basically, once you take the lid off, you definitely want to keep a good eye on it. Okay,
so if you've got a fast oven or a hot oven, 20 minutes cook time, then take the lid off. And what if it's a slow oven?
If it's a slow oven, maybe like 30 minutes.
Okay, maybe 30. So we're looking at 20 to 30 minutes. So hopefully you know your oven, because if you follow recipes and they take longer than it said, it means you have a slow oven or a cool oven. And if you follow recipes and it takes quicker, then it means you have a fast oven or a hot oven. And this table's really rocky.
I'm going to take a little of this flour out.
All right, this is cool. So we're going direct on the glass table here. We're just putting some flour direct on the glass, and we're going to demo the rest of the kneading. Thanks, Jason. He said the lighting is much better. Good to know. And Lois says, we've got 2 people. It's really sticky, and I'm afraid to add too much flour.
Don't be afraid to add too much flour.
So if it's too sticky, it needs more flour. Is that correct?
Did they already incorporate all the flour?
Did you already incorporate all the flour that was in your bowl, Lois? It takes a minute to get a response.
If they already incorporated all the flour, then you can just knead your dough a little bit, add a little bit more flour so it doesn't stick to you, and then it's pretty much ready to go. You know, you can put it in a bowl. We're going to put it in a bowl, cover it with plastic wrap or like a towel, and put it in a warm spot and let it rise.
So if you already incorporated all your flour and it's really sticky and it's sticking to your hands, do you just need to add more flour?
You can add a little more flour, but it's probably just, you know, ready to go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
If they already, like, maybe they just did this a little faster than we did.
Did you follow the measurements, Lois? Because I feel like you seem to have been, do you still have more flour in your bowl? But anyway, so everybody, you can see what he's done here. He's got the flour on the table. You could do this on a clean desktop or bench top, probably not your work desk. And what he's kind of doing is he's pressing down with the heel of his hand and flattening it like a pizza. And then he's pressing in with his fingers in the middle and sort of folding it over the top. I think this process aerates it. Is that right?
Yeah, it's just like it aerates it. It works the glutens. So that way, when it rises, it'll be a little fluffier. And, you know, with the potatoes, it's going to naturally make it a little more denser bread. So it's definitely important for this kneading process.
Okay. So let's quickly talk again about gluten. So I don't know who else has seen this hilarious viral video where they interview a bunch of people who aren't eating gluten, and all of them don't actually know what gluten is. They just think it's this bad thing. So gluten is actually a type of protein which gives wheat grain its structure, but gluten is also responsible for the elasticity and the bendiness and chewiness of baked products. That's why wheat flour works so well in baked products. And unless you have sensitivities or intolerance of gluten, there is no problem with eating gluten, especially if you're eating whole grain products and you're having a varied real food diet with lots of plants and vegetables, and you're not just eating a lot of those refined processed foods. I find it ironic, people stop eating gluten or they stop having carbohydrates, and then they say, I feel better, I've got less bloating and I'm losing weight. And I always think to myself, yes, it's because they're not having the processed cakes and cookies and all the crap that a lot of people eat a lot of. So, you know, if you're eating a whole real foods diet and you don't personally have pain and issues with gluten, you're probably going to be fine with some bread as part of a real whole foods diet. So gluten is not evil per se. It's having a crusade against it at the moment, but in the 80s and 90s it was fat, and now they're saying that the evidence shows fat doesn't cause heart disease. It's the hydrogenated fats, the processed trans fats that are on the line now. And, you know, I was reading an article the other day that was saying we have those, you know, those population studies I told you about. In a way, they're the most compelling evidence we have about what's good or bad for humans. We have societies that live on a high-fat diet, like the Mediterranean diet, and in Greenland and in Alaska, they live on high-fat diets, and they do well. They don't have the diseases of the West. They don't have the heart disease and the high blood cholesterol and the blood pressure. So some people jump on that and say that's what we should do. But then there's other examples of other societies that live on a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of grains and live on low-fat diets, for example, in Africa and in Asia. And so it's not the fats and the carbohydrates that are the enemies. Those are both macronutrients. The enemy is the never-before-seen in human history diet that we live on in the West, in the developed world, where we have all these refined sugars, refined flours. They've got the fiber removed, which is what causes the spike to your blood pressure, which causes the insulin to peak. And you don't get that with real food. So the fiber is a must, and it makes all the difference. And if you saw the recipe we just made, the no need seeded loaf, how much fiber that had in it. All of those flours are so high in fiber. And this one's not so high in fiber, but we're going to eat it with foods that have a lot of fiber. I don't know why no one in the health and nutrition world talks about the complete meal, because you don't really just sit down and eat bread on its own most of the time. You normally have it as part of a meal. And if your meal is a good meal, you're going to be getting the benefits of the fiber and the other nutrients in the rest of your meal. So Jonathan here has finished the kneading. It looks amazing. It's so beautiful.
So now we're basically just going to put it back in the bowl. There's a little bit of flour in there. You can just kind of have a little on the bottom, dust it with a little flour, and some flour in here, just kind of dust it with. There we go. And now we're gonna cover it up just with this towel, and then let it rise.
There you go, everyone. So how long do we, so just cover it with a clean cloth. Yep. And how long would we let this rise for? You said 2 hours, was it?
Yeah, about 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about, I have a quick question from someone. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing your name. It says anonymous, but she or he asked if you want to mix and knead with a KitchenAid mixer. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, this is like doing it by hand is kind of fun, but if you want to speed up the process a little bit, you can, put a dough hook on the KitchenAid and do it that way. That's fine.
Perfect. So, okay, so we're going to set this aside for 2 hours to rise, and I really want to just touch on the equipment for cooking.
Yeah.
Show them what you've bought in, and let's talk about the options there with the cast iron cook pot, just so anyone at home, you know what your options are in terms of cooking it.
So basically we have the oven already set to 450, and then if you have a Dutch oven, which is like a large pot with a lid, you can bake it in that. Or what I like to do is just 2 cast iron pans, and we'll put the bread in one, and kind of dust it with a little flour on the bottom, a little on the top, and then we'll cook it with an actual lid on top, just like that. Throw it in the oven, 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, depending on your oven, how hot it is. Or if it has a fan, it's obviously going to speed things up a little bit, so you kind of have to keep an eye on it. And then the last, 5 to 8 minutes, we're going to take this off, get some nice color on the bread.
Perfect. Now, I just want to point out the lid is actually just another pan. So there is no lid. So it's just 2 pans stacked on each other. And what if people don't have a cast iron Dutch oven or 2 stainless steel pans? What are their other options?
You could probably do like a pot with a lid. I'm sure it would work, like a safe oven pot with a metal lid.
So anything that can withstand up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit, you can use. So you can use any frying pan that has metal handles. You can use a casserole dish. You can use basically anything that can withstand that amount of heat. I guess the good thing about these is they have that heaviness and they can really withstand the heat well. That's what they're made for.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, this has finished the demo part of the workshop. If Chef Jonathan and Daniel want to bring over the finished products to demo, do we have a finished product of yours?
Mine we can actually put in the oven and bake off right now.
Okay. Well, let's bake one off and we'll start the Q&A, and we might not get to see the sourdough to its completion, but we'll see how we go. So anybody got questions for us? Daniel, do you want to come over and bring your finished loaf? You can show everyone what the professional version looks like.
So that's what I made over the weekend. It's the grain bread. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a mishap. That's why I told you earlier to add a lot of oatmeal on the bottom because I didn't add enough. It stuck to the bottom, and when I shook it out to get it out, it stuck so much that there was this it tore a little bit in the center. It shouldn't happen. So it's a little bit of a mishap here.
This looks so delicious to me. I love these really dense seeded type loaves. I'm not sure if you can see from home how dense that is and how many seeds and crispy bits it has in the middle. But also if you just notice, the outside is very brown. So if you want to brown yours that much at home, that's how much Daniel, who's the professional of this loaf, browned his. And obviously it's up to yours how much you want it cooked. And even as you get more professional at making it, you can substitute different seeds, you can try different flours. But as Daniel said in the beginning, really just stick to the recipe and get it right, and then you can branch out. So any pro tips that we haven't covered yet for this loaf?
So pro tip would be, number 1, you can actually do twice as much. So you can do the recipe for 2 loaves and bake both of them, and then you can freeze one in the freezer. So you let it. So number 1, also stepping 2 steps back. Once you bake it in the baking pan, you should, after 1.5 hours of total baking, you should take it out, let it cool for like 10-20 minutes, but not much longer, because the condensation water that comes out will collect on the bottom and on the sides in the metal pan, and then will seep back into the crust. And you don't want the crust to be watery and soft.
I've got a quick question on that. Ginger says, how do you wrap it so it's freezer safe?
I put it in a Ziploc bag.
Oh, perfect. Ziploc is amazing for everything because you remove all the oxygen. It prevents that oxidation process. Great for preserving just about anything. And someone else had a question, Jonathan, whether would glass bread pans work for the potato bread?
Glass bread pans? Yeah, it could probably work, as long as it's big enough. If it's big enough and has a lid, I'm sure it'll work fine.
Okay, great. So any other questions while we're all on?
I had.
Yes, please.
So once you're done with it and you take it out of the pan, you should really have it cool all the way before you store it away or freeze it. Once you freeze it and you want to take it out a couple of weeks later, let it get back to room temperature. And then you can put it back in the oven, 175 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. And it's almost like you did it that day.
That's a great pro tip. I love it. Yes.
What you can also do, if you like raisins, add 250 grams of raisins into that dough. Bake it just like we showed you. And you're going to have this sweet type of raisin muesli type of bread.
Dates, prunes.
Maybe, yes.
This is how I go wrong with baking. I just go crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to say something about what you've done over there? Do you want to just maybe show them that?
Yeah, I can show them this. So this is what we're gonna bake off. This is one that has risen a little bit, and what we'll do is just score a little bit the marks, kind of however you want to do it. Sometimes I'll just do like one line down the middle, almost like an X.
Chef Jonathan's used to working with much sharper knives than I have at home, so it's not quite working as well as. There we go. So he's just done a big cross through the middle to the edges. Not sure if you can see that. We've got white out again, but you get the gist. But this is kind of sliding around in there, just so you can see. It's not too sticky. And then what?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's probably just ruined the bread.
No, that's fine. Then we just cover it like this, and then we're just gonna stick it in the oven.
All right. Yeah. So perfect. So that's going to go in the oven for 20 minutes. Someone said she'd like to see what you guys do with banana bread. Maybe that'll be the next installment. We'll do baking sweets. So that's in the oven. Any other questions while we're still on? How did you start out baking breads?
I started out baking breads when I came here to the US. So I'm from Germany originally. And I think there's even a bread making institute in Germany where they collect all the official types of breads. I think there's 500 or 800 official breads in Germany. When I came here, of course, there was quite a sad situation. And I really grew up with my parents bringing me to some farm where they made sourdough bread in a wooden oven.
Wow.
So that's how I grew up, and I really missed that. So 5-6 years ago, my wife gave me a bread making machine, and I got this book with all the recipes, and we made all types of bread, and that was amazing. But I felt like I want to do the real deal. Mm-hmm. And then I started buying these books from Germany where the experts, they tell you how to do it, and it's this whole science around it, where they even say a bread should only have water, salt, and flour. That's really the only three things you need in a bread, and you can do, and maybe a potato, but then you can make an amazing bread. And that's what I felt like I want to be able to do. And so I started doing more easy recipes, stuff like this without netting, but then also things from scratch like Jonathan showed us, and that's how I got to it.
And I will say that there's anecdotal evidence that people who have had gluten intolerances, when they travel to Europe, don't have the same issues. And this has a lot to do with how the bread is made, processed bread in America, the ingredients, the quality of the ingredients that are used, the yeast that's added, versus what you buy when bread is made the traditional way. So again, if you do have issues with gluten, you can try using gluten-free flours, which were made from corn and other substitutes, or you can try the less gluten-containing flours, things like rye and spelt and oat flour will give less reactions, or you can just try making it yourself and see what happens. So your nutrition and health, it should be an ongoing journey of discovery, and no one is more in charge than you. You will find what works for your body. Like, make it a constant quest of discovery, an experience that you enjoy and look forward to. And like I say, bread is not a meal. Bread should be something that you enjoy as part of a meal, and it's not necessarily something you eat every day. It's something that you eat sometimes, each week. So that's the way you find that balance. You might make a homemade vegetable soup and eat it with a side of bread, or you might have a sandwich one day and then the next day not have bread. So it's about finding balance, and that's how you can keep having this lifestyle forever, because nothing is off limits and you can eat delicious, beautiful food for the rest of your life. Any final comments? Anything to add? Any final questions? Oh, wait, we have a question. A recipe for closs potato balls.
What is
What
that?
kind of?
This sounds like is this a dessert type thing?
Oh, you mean Klöße, the German type of dumplings?
Sounds like maybe so. I think we'll have to move on because I don't want to keep everyone behind. But yes, Jason, we will be sharing the video so you can keep the video, access it, and watch this anytime. Lois says, super cool. Wish it was in slow motion. You'll get there. You're doing great. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I have a great question, though, I want to cover before I go. Thanks, Ginger. Thank you all for being here as well. One quick question before we go. Can you eat bread every day? It's a tricky one because I don't like to say anything's off limits. So let me instead answer what I do. Do I eat every bread? Do I eat every bread? No. Do I eat bread every day? No, I don't. So bread is not something I eat every day, but it's something that I eat a few times a week. So, and the only reason I don't eat bread every day because the more you eat bread, the more you're filling up on bread instead of the other more nutritionally dense choices you could be filling up on. So when I'm not having bread, I might have oats, I might have lentils, I might have more protein that day, I might have more vegetables that day. So that's the thing with, if you're having bread every day, you're filling up on something that, this is pretty much as nutritionally dense as a bread can get. You've got seeds, you've got omega fatty acids, you've got tons of fiber in there. This is as nutritionally good as a bread can get. The sourdough potato bread, it's okay. It's got the sourdough in it. It's actually been shown that breads, whole grains are high in antioxidants and lignans, which are really good for you. But due to the phytic acid, your body can't access most of those nutrients, which is why whole grains and bread have had a bad rap. But when you use something like a sourdough starter, you actually neutralize that phytic acid and your bread can access the nutrients again, and you get better digestibility. But nonetheless, a sourdough bread made with white flour, it doesn't have a ton of fiber. It doesn't have huge amounts of whole grains and other added healthy fats like this one has. So I wouldn't eat that every day because I want to fill up on other things that do have more goodness. So bread for me, a white bread like a sourdough would still be a bit of a treat a few times a week. And something like this, same sort of thing. So that's the main reason. Same with things like pasta and rice. You want to mix up your diet with a wide variety of different nutritious foods and mainly plants. That's, a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits. So any other questions before we wrap it up? Let's see. No more questions? Well, thanks, guys. That was great. Yay. Thanks, everyone, so much for being here. Thanks to Scott. Come in and say hello. This is Scott. He's amazing. He's a videographer. He works with Nike, and he's a great friend of mine. So he's been helping out today. What a great bunch of gentlemen helping us do this cooking demo. So thanks, everyone, for being here, and I'll see you soon, and I'll be sending out the replay shortly. So just look at the camera whenever you're talking, or you can look at me.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to stop broadcasting.